Hey, Motorman here, and today we're going to talk about a question that I get an awful lot. People ask me, how long does it take to get really good at riding a heavyweight motorcycle, to be able to handle it in just about every situation? And it's a tough question to answer. It depends so much on the person. Through my over 20 years of teaching this to the average rider, I found one of the big thing that hold people back from getting really skilled and handling the bike with ease is their fear level. Let's say you have a fear level from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest fear you could possibly have, and 5 being about the average fear level. The person, of course, with the higher fear level, that timid type rider who's really scared of the motorcycle, they can learn to handle their bike with ease, on a heavyweight motorcycle. It's just going to take them longer. How much longer? It's so difficult to say. It depends really on the person and how much they really want to be able to do it. You get a lot of people who have a high fear level, and their main concern is just cruising straight on down the road and hoping for the best. And they might go to a class, and if they don't do well in the class, they figure, well, I don't need this. Who really does this stuff? Well, that kind of person may never learn. But generally, a person, let's say, with a number 5 in their fear level scale, it's going to take them, if they just come to the class, they don't know anything about the techniques, they come to my class, and in 4 hours, they're going to leave there the average person with that 5% or number 5 skill level or fear level. It's going to, in 4 hours, they're going to be at least 3 times the rider they were when they first started in the morning. The people with the very high, 8 or 10, they'll generally leave the class, if their mindset is right, in other words, they really want to learn the stuff, twice the rider that they were when they started. At the very least, they'll know what the tools are, i.e. the techniques, and they'll know how to use them. It's up to them to practice then on their own, and then hopefully come back in a couple of months and display their skills and allow me to help refine their skills. Now, I have people that come to the class who seem to have a very low fear level, and those people have gotten my video and actually went out and practiced and spent 3, 4, 5 hours or more practicing on their own. And the reason I mentioned the video is because in the video we show a specific order to learning the techniques, and that order is tried and true. We've been doing it at motor training for like 70 years. So if they followed that specific order, and then they started to practice and they got really good, and then they come to the class, and really all I have to do, it makes my job so much easier, all I have to do is refine their skills a little bit. This past last week we had a class, and I hadn't put up any video from that class yet. We had, I think, started with 12 riders, and in that class we had one particular rider who got the video, practiced on his own, and got really good. When I say really good, I wouldn't put him in motor officer level, motor officer being the top 2% of riders in America. He was probably in the top 5%, which is fine. That's, compared to the other 95%, this guy was excellent. And, he wasn't a kid. I would guess his age is around 60 years old. And he was easily able to perform all the exercises at 24 foot. In fact, at towards the end of the class, he and I think it was 2 or 3 other riders, and I'm going to show you a video, and I'm going to point out this particular rider. He was using the techniques very well, but not to the extreme. When I say the extreme, not to actual motor officer level. And you could see that. I'm going to point it out to you, and I had him making 18-foot U-turns and a figure 8 between 2 parking spaces wide by 2 parking spaces long. That's about 18 foot by 36. That's difficult. You'll see that he doesn't turn his head as far as possible, which is what you have to do in that situation to not have to run over the lines. So, but his skill level was really, really good compared to the average person. I mean, superior to the average rider. The average rider can't even make about a 30-foot U-turn. So the fact that this guy could turn in 18 foot 6 inches or so, that's pretty good. Then we have another type of rider who doesn't have a high fear level, and I happen to have one of those riders in my class that week as well. This rider was a gentleman who was 72 years old, but in very good physical condition for his age. So it wasn't like he was limping or anything like that, or had bad back or legs. But anyway, he didn't have any fear, but he got discouraged very easily, frustrated. And I'm going to show you a video of him. He at times would do very well, and I'd say about half the time, and half the time just totally lose it. And his main problem was having the ability to stay in the friction zone, stay in that gray area, and manipulate the clutch and throttle properly. Sometimes he would, when he was screwing up, what he would do is pull the clutch in, and then he doesn't have enough forward momentum. In other words, he was at that 5 miles per hour or less, where you have the force of gravity pulling you down, overriding the force pulling you forward. So he dropped his bike several times and really got frustrated. But I offered to give him a private class, which I did yesterday. I'm going to show you some films of that, and he did improve. Probably 3/4 of the time he was doing well, and a quarter of the time just totally losing that control of the clutch and throttle again. And in about an hour and a half, or hour and 15 minutes, because of his age, I think, he got tired and started to get worse. So I knew it was, and he knew as well, it was time to stop practicing for him because of his age, and the fact that it's now 90 degrees down here in Florida. That doesn't help your stamina. So it was time for him to stop. And I explained to him what he needs to do. He knows what the techniques are. He knows what order he should be using to practice those techniques. And he's got to do some stuff on his own and then come back to a regular class again. In other words, the one-on-one lesson is not going to help him any further than where he's at now. He's going to have to practice what I've taught him. But to try to nail down a particular amount of time it's going to take the average person to get really skillful, it depends on what you're looking for. To get to motor officer level, that's the top 2%, it's probably you're gonna have to put in, well, I'd say at least 3 days straight of 8 hours a day practice to get to that level. If you did just a couple of hours a day, probably, or let's say 2 or 3 hours a week, is going to take you about a month to get pretty close to motor officer level. And then there's another level where you're really, really good. You use the techniques. I'm going to use my wife as an example. She's excellent. She's as good as probably most motor officers. She's not as good as, say, a motor officer who rides on the rodeos. Those guys are, that's all they do. They put in so much practice, you wouldn't believe it. When you go to one of those rodeos, prior to going to the rodeo, you get the exact course and measurements. So a lot of these agencies, they have a few guys that they're going to send to the rodeo. They'll have them spend a week or two practicing that particular rodeo course. So by the time they get there, they're really good at it. In addition, they usually have a day or two at the rodeo to practice before the competition actually starts. So when you're seeing these guys on YouTube going through and the different exercises and all the turns and the way they're maneuvering the motorcycle, they put in a whole bunch of practice. Most people aren't willing to do that, and most people don't need to do that just to be able to handle an 800 or 900 pound motorcycle with ease and to be a better, safer rider. That's the level I put my wife in. If I were to take her to the motor officer course, which we did about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, but it's been that long since she's actually run the 18-foot course. It would take her probably a good 3 hours to be able to complete that course without any error being hitting a cone or putting a foot down, that type of thing. And she's excellent with the electric glides and the Road Kings. And if you saw the video I did when I put her on this bike, on the lowrider, she doesn't like change. So she was actually kind of nervous. It brought her, you know, on her bike, her fear level is practically 0, maybe 1. On this bike, her fear level was about 3. And so she was a little tentative, and she didn't use the techniques to the extreme. But after about 20 minutes, and that wasn't even 20 minutes in a row, it was, we'd start a new exercise, I'd let her run through it twice. So it took a total about 20 minutes to get comfortable with this bike. Not as good on this bike as she is on her electric glide, but after about 20 minutes, she felt fine. Since she rode this bike, by the way, I should let you know, I've got Bun King risers on this bike. These risers are, I think, 5.5 inches taller with an 1.5 inch pullback. So that puts the handlebar closer to me, which gives you more leverage. And especially, she's quite a bit smaller than me, so she would do much better now that she would have more leverage to turn the bar. She wouldn't be stretching as far. And I want to thank Bun King for sending those to me, and also to let you know that if you go with those risers, you're going to have to lift up the tank, and there's a little rubber piece there where the wires that come to the handlebars go through. You're gonna have to cut a couple of the ties that are on there to have enough play to fit that on there. Also, you probably have to relocate the clutch cable. But other than that, it's just, you know, 2 bolts for the risers, and then 4 bolts to put the handlebars in. But I find it right now, it's still not perfect as compared to my Road King or the electric glide as far as the distance that my hands are from the seat to the hand grips, but it's pretty close. I don't think I'll have to do any more. I want to avoid changing the handlebars, because that turns into a nightmare with all the wiring. But anyway, Bun King, you get a hold of them, tell them Motorman sent you, they'll hook you up. And that's about it as far as my talk with you today. But pay special attention to the video, the class videos I'm going to show you. You'll notice, I think it's 3 or 4 riders that got really, really good. One rider who just had my video and practiced, he said a couple of times, and he was probably the best rider in the class. You'll see him as well. I'll point him out to you. He was able to do the 18 by 36 figure 8 after, I think, just 2 tries. That type of person, he had virtually no fear. He never dropped his bike once in the class, never even came close. He knew the techniques. I refined his skills for him, and he was able to do that 18 by 36 pretty easily. In fact, he's the type of person that normally it takes to go through the motor officer course and get good at it, it takes about 5 days. Well, I'm not sure the hours he's put in, but I know that in 1 day he'd be able to run the motor officer course without error. So if you like these tips that I give you in the videos that I put out, I would hope that you subscribe and click the little bell to be notified when I come out with a video. I try to do at least 2 a week, sometimes 3 or more. So please subscribe, click the little bell, give me a thumbs up, and until next time.